Hello all you bladers and welcome to Beyblade Basics, a series where we take a look at the small things in Beyblade and make sure that bladers know their basics. In episode 1 today, I'm going to be talking about the 4 different types of Beyblade, the advantages, disadvantages, and special characteristics that each type has. Now first, you need to know the outer triangle of the 3 types. An attack type has an advantage against the stamina type, a stamina type has an advantage against the defense type, and a defense type has an advantage against an attack type. Now, balance types are usually in the center of this triangle because they do not have any advantages or disadvantages. Now, first, starting with attack types. Attack types are usually the most unique out of the 3 because stamina types, balance types, and defense types usually have somewhat of a circular or squarish shape. Attack types are different because they are much faster, much more aggressive, and they have blades on all of them. For an example, this attack type, Brave Valkyrie, with the parts Brave Valkyrie 2A Evolution Dash, is a fast attack type with rubber and 3 blades. Now you can usually tell if a Beyblade is an attack type if it has a larger surface area. For example, if I take this defense type and compare it to Brave Valkyrie, you'll notice that the blades are a little bit wider than the circular shape of the defense type. Now, an attack type is usually used for attacking, as the name might suggest. It can do a flower pattern where you tilt the launcher and it goes into a flower pattern, making it easier to hit bays that take the center. You can launch it flat and it'll accelerate around the edge of the stadium to knock other attack types out. Or you can launch it in different ways to make it go around, then come in the center. There are different ways you can launch attack types, and with different materials on the tips, and different types of tips, shapes, and weights, there are many ways you can launch attack types. Now going over a stamina type, the stamina type's main ability, or main, advantage, or goal, is to spin as long as its possible state can. A stamina type wants to spin as long as it possibly can, because that is what a stamina type is meant to do. A stamina type is usually a very circular bay. It's not as circular as most bays. Some balance types, for example, a balance type World Spriggan, is more circular than this Glide Ragnarok. Now, stamina types are not the heaviest of bays, because the heavier a Beyblade is, the more friction it exerts into the stadium, therefore the more downward force it exerts. And that is what a defense type is meant for, but a stamina type is different. See, a stamina type wants to exert as less friction as possible and to spin as long as possible. To do that, they usually, at the end of their tips, have a very small tip. Now this is revolve. It usually has a sharp tip, but because I've used this base so much, the tip has gotten a little bit duller. Now, the reason it has a sharp tip is because with a sharp tip, only the very edge of the tip is making contact with the stadium, therefore exerting as less friction as possible while still spinning. This is the same physics as a wheel on a car, where only the small little spikes on the wheel are making contact with the floor, and that's why cars can go as fast as they can go. Now, stamina types are not light, they're not heavy, they're usually average weight. They're not heavy because they want to exert as least friction as they can into the stadium, therefore saving their spin or stamina for a longer time. But they're not light either because stamina types want to spin as long as possible. And although they try to avoid attacks, stamina types usually aren't fast. They take the center, and that usually leaves them open to attack types hitting them with a rush launch or a flower pattern, and that's usually why attack types have an advantage against stamina types, because stamina types don't have the necessary defense to defend against the attack types. Now, they can still spin long, but they don't usually have the defense or the burst resistance to not get bursted or knocked out of the stadium. Now, a defense type is pretty much like a stamina type, but different. You see, a defense type, you can usually tell is a defense type if it is very, very heavy. Now, this is Keeper Kerbeus. Not many people have this because I personally created its stock combo. Now, Keeper Kerbeus, if you notice the, side angle, is a very thick Beyblade. Defense types are circular than stamina types, usually more circular to disperse the damage of attack types. Now, if I take this attack type and I guess recreate the image of it attacking the Bey, with a stamina type, it can hit these little edges here and burst it, right? Stamina types usually don't have a lot of edges, but they don't have defenses, so that can leave them open to bursts or getting knocked around by an attack type. Now, with a defense type, it's different because defense types are much heavier and they exert much more downward force into the stadium, therefore exerting more friction and making them harder to move. So that is why defense types are so good at resisting getting knocked out, because as hard as attack types hit them, if the defense type is good, the defense type will barely get moved because it's so heavy. Another thing is, see these little boulders here? You may think those are for attacks, but no, they're really not. You see this blade here, and see this curved blade here? Let's say it starts attacking here, right? It will get deflected off these small edges. If the edge was smooth and there was no bumps, then it would still be able to attack, but the Beyblade would have more stamina. Now, defense types have a disadvantage against stamina types because they're heavier and they don't have as much spin time as stamina types, so stamina types can usually spin longer. Now, you could argue that defense types could knock stamina types around, but no. You see, because they're so heavy, they can't move around as much. The lighter a Beyblade is, the faster it moves around. And with an attack type, even if it's heavy like this Brave Valkyrie with a whopping 66 grams, if the driver is shaped perfectly and moves around, then it can still be fast, even if it is heavy. Defense types, however, are not like that, because unlike a stamina type, their tip is not very sharp. Their tip is usually very wide, and it has lots of friction because it has a large surface area. Now, this large surface area can cause them to get knocked back and come back into position. And that allows them to not get KO'd as well as not bursting because the damage is dispersed along their layer. But they still have a disadvantage against stamina types because of their wide surface area and how heavy they are, and that's usually why they don't have enough spin time to beat a stamina type. Now, with a balance type, it's very, very different because balance types are the most unique out of the three types. They are basically all three of the types combined, but less powerful. You see, it has the stamina, it has the attack, and it has the defense, but at a lower level. For example, let's say an attack type, stamina type, let's say an attack type has 100 out of 100 attack. A stamina type has 100 out of 100 stamina, and a defense type has 100 out of 100 defense. But a balance type has 30 defense, 30 attack, and 30 stamina. It has all of the abilities, but on a lesser level. That's why balance types don't have a disadvantage or advantage. They can use those qualities to do different strategies, move around differently, defend, attack, or spin as long as possible while dodging, or simply taking the center. Now, this specific balance type is World Springin'. Its tip is very, very sharp, but it has gotten worn down. Now, this usually would classify it as a stamina type, but no. If you look closely, you can see this yellow ring around it. That's called rubber, which means if you launch a balance type at an angle near the edge of the stadium, or it gets knocked onto that rubber, it can move around faster, and that's what causes balance types to attack. Not all balance types, attack types, stamina types, or defense types are exactly like the ones I have in this video, but they're very similar, and that's why each one has its own unique characteristics, and that's why Beyblade is so interesting and fun, because just because an attack type has an advantage against a stamina type does not mean the stamina type will always lose. For example, an attack type is fast, which means if it doesn't make contact with the stamina type, it'll lose its juice, and the stamina type will win. A defense type can still hit hard enough to knock a stamina type out, or since the wide surface area is so wide, and this surface area is so small, it can knock the stamina type off its axis and take the center from it. And a balance type, because it has the different abilities and different characteristics, but to a lower level of each type, it can use different strategies or those different characteristics for a specific plan for each opponent. And that is your basic rundown of the 4 different types. what characteristics they have, how you can tell one from another, and how they have disadvantages, advantages, or don't have any of that, like a balance type to each other. Now, once again, it's not exactly the case where this triangle with a balance type in the center is not always the case, because a stamina type could have defense. For example, this is Keeper Kerbeus. If I gave it a better stamina tip, it would still have defense because of the layer dispersing damage, but its tip could still have stamina. So you have hybrids. For example, Imperial Dragon is an attack type / stamina type hybrid. Another example is that Keeper Kerbeus is somewhat of a stamina type / defense type hybrid because it has a lot of stamina. Glide Ragnarok is also pretty heavy against most beys that are not, high tier, so it cannot get knocked around that easily. And that is why Beyblade's so fun, because it's not always what's gonna happen. Now, there are a lot more characteristics, like counterclockwise spins, or the weight of a Beyblade, or if it can spin steel, or the type of stadium, or the power of the launcher, or any of that, even the types of launching which you'll do. And in the next episode, episode 2 of Beyblade Basics, I'm going to be featuring how you should launch each Beyblade, and that is going to be pretty interesting with all 4 types, and now that you know the 4 types. So once again, Beyblade Basics is a series where we take a look at the small things in Beyblade and make sure that the bladers know their basics, because with all these new Season 6 stuff coming out, people forget about the basic stuff. So if you have any questions whatsoever about the 4 types, what different characteristics they have, or how one has a disadvantage, advantage, or doesn't have one in each type, I guess, or scenario, please just let me know in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer your question or help you out. And with that being said, have fun, peace out, and don't forget to keep on blading.